we are together. Pastor Ash, it means so much when you said that we are family, because that's the way we feel about you and the family here at Family Worship Center. And we're just so thrilled to be with you this week and be with you this morning. I can't believe it's been a year. Time is moving, isn't it? I was having a conversation with my wife before we left. Get this, about Christmas. Are you kidding? Christmas? Yeah. She's talking about it already. Christmas is going to come, and we got a few traditions in our family of things that we like to do. One of the things that we set out every single year when we start planning our Christmas calendar is the night that my family will gather and make some Christmas cookies. We've got a baggie full of Christmas cookie cutters, right? Those things that you place on the cookie, and maybe you can make a Christmas tree, or maybe you can make an angel, or maybe you can make a star, or you got all these different Christmas cutters or cookie cutters in Christmas shapes that we make. And you know what's never happened? What's never happened is we've never took a ball of cookie dough, thrown it onto the plate, put it in the oven, and it come out a Christmas tree. That's never happened. It comes out in a round cookie every single time. We've never just thrown a clump of cookie dough on the plate, throw it in, and all of a sudden bring it out and we have a star. That doesn't happen. You see, it's formed by the things that are around it. It's formed when you place the cutter and you push down on it, and that cookie is formed by that cutter. You are formed by something. You are going to be formed by something. You're going to be formed by the influences of this world. You're going to be formed by social media influences. You're going to be formed by the people that you work with, or your neighbors that may be far from God, or you will be formed by the cross. And you will be formed by what Christ accomplished for you on the cross and made to look more like him in the world in which you live. We are all formed by something. Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8, verse 31. Jesus is talking here. We're going to walk through Acts chapter 8 through verse 31 through 38 this morning. And we're going to look at three shifts we need to make if we desire to be formed by the cross of Christ in this world in which we live. Now, when you come to the book of Mark, anytime you read Mark, you ought to come to the book and you ought to ask three questions when you're in the book of Mark. Anytime you read in the book of Mark, you ask these three questions every single time, because no matter where you are in the book of Mark, it's going to answer at least one of these three questions, and here they are. When you read the book of Mark, you ask this question: who is Jesus? Mark answers that question. Why did Jesus come to earth? Mark answers that question. Or the third question: what does it look like for me to follow him? When you come to the book of Mark, you ask one of those three questions, or you ask those three questions, and no matter what text you're in the book of Mark, it will always answer one of those three. Today we're in luck. We got all three. We get all three right here in Mark chapter 8, verse 31. We read this. It says, then. Now, anytime we didn't get very far, did we? Because anytime you're reading the Bible and you see the word then, and you haven't read what's before the then, you should always go back up and at least be acquainted with what came before it. Because then's a pretty important word, right? If I have a job and my boss says, and then you'll get paid, and I missed everything he said before it, like then's real important. Like if my wife says to me, and then we'll have supper, what'd she say before that? Because I want to do that. And so when we read in the Bible, he says, then he began to teach them. Well, what happened before he launched into this teaching? And this isn't up in the screen, but here's what happens. Jesus asked the disciples who the world says it is, and Peter says, you are the Messiah. Who do you say that I am? This is verse 29, not on the screen. We'll get back to the screen in just a second. He says, but you, he asked them, who do you say that I am? And he says, you are the Messiah. And he strictly warned them to tell no one about him. Peter's saying, you're the promised one. You're the one we've been waiting for. You're the one Scripture tells us about. And then upon that declaration that Peter made, we get into verse 31. He says, then he began to teach them that it was necessary for the Son of God to suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed, rise on the third day. He spoke openly about this. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning around and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, big words right here, get behind me, Satan. You're not thinking about God's concerns, but human concerns. Calling the crowds along with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life because of me and the gospel will save it. Verse 36. For what does it benefit someone to gain the whole world yet lose his life? What can anyone give in exchange for his life? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in glory of the Father with his holy angels. So in this short account of Mark chapter 8, there are three shifts we have to make to really be formed by the cross in this world. The first one is this. We're going to make a shift in this idea that we're going to shift from the optional to the necessary. Look what he says. He says, hey, it is necessary for me to die. It's necessary. See, a lot of people would put the work of Jesus as one option among many in the world religions. That you can have Jesus, that's fine, and I'll have what I have, but I can be and do all that I want to be, and I can somehow meet God in heaven without seeing the cross as necessary. Jesus says that's not so. He says the cross is necessary for us. Peter would even say the cross is unthinkable. It's unthinkable. You see, ever since Peter was like a little small boy, and he would sit on the knee of his grandmother, she was likely telling him stories about the Messiah who was to come. She was likely getting him to look forward and to look towards this Messiah. And in this text, we see a couple of things. We see the Son of Man. This term comes out of Daniel 7, which communicates his kingship and his dominion. But then also he uses the word suffering, which calls back from Isaiah 53. It's the picture of the suffering servant. Here's what Jesus is saying in this text. Here's what Mark chapter 8 is helping us see, that Jesus is saying, yes, I am a king, but I am a king that's headed to a cross. This word necessary, or maybe your verse says must, kind of controls the rest of the sentence. It is necessary that Jesus suffer. It is necessary that he is rejected. It is necessary that he is killed, and it is necessary that he is resurrected. It's what theologians call the divine necessity. It is necessary for you, it is necessary for me that Jesus live, die, and rise again. Because of my sin, I could not pay the debt that was owed. But Jesus Christ, when he went to the cross on my behalf and accomplished this necessary life, death, and resurrection, then through Christ I may live. It's necessary for us. But this idea of Jesus going to the cross didn't set well with Peter, right? Go back to the text. He spoke openly about this. This is verse 32. And Peter took him aside, began to rebuke him. Turning around and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, get behind me, Satan. You're not thinking about God's concerns, but humans' concerns. Have you ever read that and think, whoa, like that escalated quickly, right? He just called one of his most faithful disciples Satan. Like, seem a little harsh? Why did he do that? Can I tell you why? Because in Matthew chapter 4, after Jesus has been fasting, Satan comes to tempt him. And through the temptations, here's what Satan is trying to get Jesus to do. He's trying to deceive him by saying this: Jesus, there's a way to get the kingdom that bypasses the cross. And Jesus doesn't buy into the temptation of Satan because Jesus knows that the cross is necessary and that there's no way to get the kingdom apart from the cross. And so when Satan says, hey, or when Peter says, you're not going to die, he calls back to Matthew 4. He says, get behind me, Satan, because the exact same thing Peter was saying is exactly the same thing Satan was saying when Peter was saying, Jesus, come on, Jesus. There's a way to get the kingdom and escape the cross. So he says, no, there's not. The cross is necessary. See, in our culture, oftentimes we think the cross is optional. The cross is decorative. Let me tell you what happens in America. And I haven't been around here long enough to know if this is the case in Johannesburg. But a lot of people use the cross just as a room decoration. Like they used to decorate their house. Some people get cross necklaces and wear them everywhere. Like they'll just wear crosses everywhere, and it's decorative, it's jewelry. One time when I went and looked, I tried to find, Google was my friend, and I went and asked my friend Google. I said, Google, how many cross pieces of cross jewelry have been sold in the last, I forget how many years in the United States? Google didn't give me an answer, but Google instead directed me. The first search was common questions people ask about the cross. Common questions people ask about the cross. Let me read you the top 4 that I found here in my Google search. Number 1, what makes the cross so popular? People go into Google and asking that question. Number 2, who made the cross so popular? Number 3, what's the cross known for? Top questions asked about cross jewelry. Question number 4, why does Kim Kardashian wear a cross? Our text gives us the answer for the first 3. The 4th one, you're on your own, okay? I got nothing for you on the 4th one. What made the cross so popular? Who made the cross so popular? What's the cross known for? The cross is known as an instrument of execution that was used because I could not on my own, through my own works, get myself in the right relationship with God. So therefore, God had to come to earth for me because my sin separated me from him, and that Jesus Christ said the cross is necessary because he knew I couldn't earn my place before God. And so if we're going to be formed by the cross, we don't see the cross as optional, but we see the cross as necessary for our life. The second shift that we make the shift from saving to losing. Look at verse 34. Calling the crowd along with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life because of me and the gospel will save it. He says the next step in this idea of being formed by the cross is to move from saving our life, from preserving our life, to making all of the decisions about us instead to giving up our life. Think about this. What would it look like for you to deny yourself? We live in a world that doesn't deny ourselves very well. One of the things that I talk about with my family often as we recount our day, one of the questions that I'll ask them is this. We'll go around the table and we'll answer this question. Can you give me a time today where you wanted to do something but you didn't? Can you tell me a time today where you did something but you didn't really want to do it? Because what happens? Self is king. If I want to do it, that's what I do. If it comes into my mind, I must think about it. If it's an idea, I must act on it. But there's just this lack of denying ourselves. But Jesus said, hey, we want to deny ourselves, take up your cross, and follow him. To follow Jesus, to be an active pursuit of Jesus. To active pursuit of Jesus, to live like Jesus. If you said, Matt, follow me, and I said, I'm doing it, I'm following you, and you take off and I stand still, and you turn back and you say, what are you doing? I said, I'm just following you. You said, well, I'm across the room and you're still there. You're not very good at following. Well, oftentimes we look at our life, and I ask you this, in what ways does your life look like Jesus? I heard a story years ago when my son came to me and he wanted to play baseball. The guy told me a story about his son playing baseball. And he said, baseball sometimes in the United States can get kind of costly. When I played baseball, they used to give everybody a couple bats, a couple helmets to put on their head, and a couple of gloves and just sent you out there. It's not the case anymore. Each family has to buy a bat. They have to buy a glove. And they got to buy a helmet for their head. And so he set his son down. He said these things to him. He said, listen, son, for you to play baseball is costly. But I want you to know something. I've paid the cost for you, but there's 2 things I want you to do. Number 1, don't quit. And number 2, when you get out there, participate. Because if you've ever seen a 5-year-old on a baseball field, there's more picking flowers and building dirt mounds than there is playing baseball. Here's what he said. He says, son, I've paid, but when you step on that field, you participate. Jesus has said to us through the necessity of the cross, the price he paid for you, he said this to you, I've paid the cost for you. Participate. Participate in the mission of Jesus. I'm afraid for Christians in the world, sometimes we're building more dirt mounds and picking flowers more than we are concerned about following the things that Jesus actually told us to do. And if he said, well, what about my life? When Jesus says, hey, loser, you want to save your life? Then give it up. Give it up for the gospel and for his mission in the world. We live for his mission. We deny ourselves. Can I ask you a question? Do you consider your existence more important than Jesus? We're not going to say it out loud, will we? But maybe by our actions, we consider it. I have two boys, 17 and 13. One is very quiet and reserved and does everything he asks. The other one doesn't, okay? And when that 13-year-old was about 4 years old, he got in trouble. I forget what for, probably for hitting his brother, but he got sent to sit on his bed, and I'll be back there to talk to you in a minute. Go sit on your bed. And after a while, I hear some crying happening through the door. And so I'm like, well, this will be interesting. So I open the door, and I go sit on the bed by my son, and before I discipline him for hitting his brother, I ask him the question. I said, buddy, why are you crying? And through his tears, this 4-year-old looks at me and says, Dad. I said, yeah, because I just want to be in charge. I said, like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah. This is what exactly he says. You and mom can be the number 2 in charge, but I want to be the number 1 in charge. He got double disciplined. I walked out of the door. I shut the door in his room, and I thought, man, how ridiculous. My immature 4-year-old, he just doesn't know much about the world, looking at me, his dad, who knows so much about the world, and saying, Dad, I want to be in charge. Man, I thought, so immature. Shut the door, started to walk down the hall of my house. How many times in my life do I look to God with far wisdom and knowledge than I've ever known? And I look at him and say, God, in this area, I'm going to be in charge. When it comes to this thing, this habit, when it comes to this relationship, when it comes to forgiveness or non-forgiveness, when it comes to what I do with my finances, when it comes to what I do with my time, I'm in charge. When we consider this shift that we make from saving our life to losing our life for the sake of the gospel, last shift we need to make is a shift from shame to admiration. Look at verse 38. For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in glory of his Father with the holy angels. It's a shift from shame to admiration. That instead of being ashamed of God, we admire God. It looks far different than the world, but we live in a way that says, I want to live in a way that honors God. Because see, here's what happens. When you say, I'm going to live as God's in charge, and I'm going to see the cross as necessary, and I'm going to give my life to the mission of Jesus, here's what happens. You begin to look real different from the world around you. And in the way that you look different, here's going to be the temptation on your life. To revert back to what you did so you don't stick out. Because you might be shameful of Christ and his impact in your place in the world. And rather than face the rebuke of your neighbor or your family member or your coworker, you just kind of blend in or you don't say anything at all. And what Jesus is saying, hey, let's be careful in taking this posture. Let's be careful in saying this because everyone's ashamed of me. The Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes into glory. What's he saying? He says a marker of someone who's in relationship with God is someone who lives his life in admiration and proclamation and witness to what God has done in his life. Jonathan and I were talking Premier Soccer the other day when we were riding around. Premier League Soccer, and we're talking about, I know the season had just started, and we were talking about how Manchester is not doing well, right? And I know some of you are Manchester fans, but things aren't well. Can you imagine a diehard Manchester fan wearing a Manchester jersey, and they see someone else coming? Pastor Ash, who's your team? And they see Pastor Ash coming. And they know Pastor Ash is a Liverpool fan. And they know Pastor Ash might have something to say about Manchester start. So when they see him coming with that Manchester United jersey on, they quickly reach and grab a coat. Doesn't matter that it's way hot outside. And they put that coat on and they zip it all the way up to the top. You know what I'm talking about? And Pastor Ash comes and he greets them and they talk for a moment, and he's just so ashamed of his allegiance to his team that he has to have that zipped all the way to the top. That's probably not going to happen, is it? Because whether Manchester is doing well or whether Manchester is not doing well, the Manchester fans I know are proud. And they're not, oh, I see that hand. And they're not gonna kind of fade away from that. They're gonna step into it. And here's the thing: could it be that sometimes we're more proud of sports allegiances than we are to our allegiance to Christ? Can we be more proud in other things in other areas of our life than we are in our allegiance to Jesus? That we would live a life that says, God, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. For it is the power to save. So to understand what it means to step into a life that says the cross is necessary, what it means to step into a life that says that I want to not save my life and live with me at the center, but I want to lose my life for the gospel, and for what it means to live a life that says, hey, I'm going to live in such a way that I'm shown as admiring or pointing to or proud of who I am as a new creation in Christ. We have to fully understand the gospel. So as I close, let me do so with one story that I shared with our church about 5 years ago that I think really tries to give us the picture of the gospel. And then after I share this, let me just go ahead and tell you where I'm headed, okay? Just so we all know. After I share this story, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the room who today, for the very first time in their life, wants to give their heart and their life to following Jesus. So not playing games. We're not trying to trick you into anything. I want you to know very clearly where we're headed. Then after that, we're going to have a time of prayer for maybe someone in the room who's given their life and said yes to following Jesus, but if they're honest, they've been living their life as if they're in charge. We're going to give you a time to respond in that. This story happened a long, long time ago. It's a story of an ancient king in an ancient world. And this king, what was known to be the most loving king, but yet also the fairest king who ever lived. And one day, the king realized that some money had been stolen out of his personal treasury. And they come to him and say, King, hey, those who are in charge of his accounting for his funds said, King, listen, we've seen that there has been money stolen out of your treasury. And he said, you put word out that whoever stole money out of my treasury is going to get 10 lashes. Word goes out. The accountants come back to him a few days later and say, King, no one has been caught, but we found that more money has been gone out of your treasury. He says, you put the word out. When we find the individual who's stealing my money, 20 lashes. A few days later, they come back to him, King, we still haven't found the person, but more money has been taken from your treasury. And he says, okay, here's the deal. He said, you put the word out, 40 lashes, which is essentially death. And finally, only a few days later, they come back to the king and they say, King, good news, we found who's stolen money out of your treasury. And the king says, bring them to me. And the doors open there in his kingdom, right in the middle of his palace. And in walks his only daughter. And they look at him and they look at the king and they think, what is he going to do? He's the most loving king, and we know how much he loves his daughter. Surely he's going to say it's fine and let her go free. But then someone else piped up on the other side, there's no chance he's going to do that. He's the fairest king we've ever known. He is known for his justice. He will be just in this circumstance. The king walks his daughter outside along with several soldiers, and he declares she must be tied up to the post. Remove her shirt, the back of her shirt, expose her back. She will receive the lashes. The executioner takes the whip and raises it high, and just as he gets it above the air, the king says, "Stop!" Walks over to his daughter, takes off his own shirt, leans down beside his daughter, and covers her back with his. And he says, "Now deliver the punishment." The executioner says, "No." He turns his head around. He says, "I am the king. You will do what I say." And the first lash hits, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, until 40 lashes have been given, and the king falls over dead, while the daughter is untied from the stump and told to go free. This is the gospel. You are a sinner who deserves death because of your sin. I am a sinner who deserves death because of my sin that separated me from God. But the king left heaven, came to earth, went to the cross on your behalf so that you might live. And he died in your place so that you might have life in him. And you say, "Well, how do I get this life?" You confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. And the Bible says you will be saved. And I don't know if there's anybody in the room right now who would say, "That's where I am." That for the very first time in my life, I want to ask God to forgive me of my sins. I want to put my faith and trust in Jesus, and I want to surrender my life to him. So here's what I want to do. I want Pastor Ash to come and stand with me. And I want with the rest of us just to bow our heads and close our eyes right here in this moment. And I want to ask, with every head bowed and every eye closed across the room, if there's an individual in the room who would say, for the very first time in my life, this morning, today, I want to put my faith and my trust in what Jesus Christ accomplished for me on the cross. And if that's you right now, would you just, with every head bowed and every eye closed, just slide your hand up into the air so Pastor Ash can see? If you're in the room today and you would say, "Hey, I want to pray with somebody. Circumstances of life are hard, and I'm struggling to trust Jesus in the midst of them." Or if you would say, "Man, I've become ashamed of God," or I've kind of adopted some things of the world and I've left behind God, or I've sought to be in charge of my life and I've given up the lordship of Christ in my life in some certain areas. I'm going to pray for us in just a moment, and then when we look up from prayer, a few of my friends are going to be around the room, and if you would have anything in life you would love for them to, or like for them to pray for today, they would love to pray for you. If you're here today, and maybe your hand didn't go up to say, "I want to follow Jesus for the very first time," then come to Pastor Ash and say, "Hey, I'm ready to follow Jesus for the very first time." Or when you go to one of our friends to pray, just say, "I'm ready to follow Jesus for the very first time." They're going to ask you, "Hey, how can I pray for you?" You're going to tell them how they can pray for you, and then they're just going to pray for you. We just want to give this time to the Lord. If you say, "I just need to talk to God by myself," that's cool. Just stay where you are and spend time in prayer with him. Let's pray together. God, I thank you that you came to the cross in our place, that we deserve death. We're separated from you with no hope and no life. But through Christ, you made a way. And God, because of what you've accomplished for us in Christ, God, I pray we would live our lives in a way that says we want to save our life. We don't want to live as king of our life. We want to be in charge of our life. We want to live our life freely, to do what you say and to go where you call us. Or God, if we would be honest this morning, we would think of an area, a friendship, where we're kind of being ashamed of you and your word. God, that you would convict us of that. Maybe we just ask someone to pray with us this morning. Or maybe we got something else going on, Lord, that hasn't even been touched this morning. God, I pray you'd give us the courage and the boldness to step up and just ask someone, just, hey, will you pray with me? God, we give you these next few moments. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. This morning, if you need prayer, can we all stand? But if you need prayer, we've got friends that travel all the way to South Africa and they want to pray with you and for you. If you need prayer, if your child needs prayer, if you as a family needs prayer, then I want to encourage you to come right now in Jesus' name. If you need prayer, come and we're going to pray with you and for you in Jesus' name.